Hello, my name is Rob Garner. I'm a software development instructor, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to use Git and GitHub with a Visual Studio Code Blazor application. So we have our project, it's already built, it's working, and we just started this repo or this project. So we want to make a repository very quickly. The first thing we want to do before we start working with Git is put a git ignore file in here. So I'm going to put a .ignore file in, or rather a git ignore file. And what the git ignore file does for us is when we check things into Git, the git ignore file will make sure that we don't include files up on the repository on the web that we don't need to be there. There's a lot of files that when you build a solution are needed to build a solution, but you don't necessarily need them there. So how do we get this git ignore file? If you go to github.com, GitHub, and then git ignore, there's a whole list of them here for different types of projects. The one we want is the one for Visual Studio. And here's the Visual Studio git ignore. And so you could download this, but then you'd have to change it from Visual Studio.gitignore to .gitignore. It's probably easiest just to copy the file here and then paste it in. You can do it either way though. Now what this is a list of things to exclude from the repo when you're moving it back and forth. Things like user prefs, things like debug files. There's a whole bunch of files that are not needed, like to be put onto the server. They're usually things that are auto-generated by the build process. And one thing to note especially is your database files are here. And one thing to look for is .db files. That's vc.db. And it is not actually this will include our database file. So one things that you might want to do is, and I'm going to do this, is add my add the SQLite database files, because I don't want the database to go up on the server. And it's got user authentication information, email addresses, things like that. So we'll keep those unique on each developer's local machine. So now that we have our git ignore in place, the next thing is to add it to source control. Now, it might be tempting to use the tooling here, and this will work if you're publishing to your own personal repo. But if you are using an organizational repo, these don't really work very well. So in my courses, I will usually assign all my students to an organization. And if you're working with a team, this is going to be how you generally want to do this. So from the next class I'm teaching, and eventually I'll add my students to this. So if you're a student in my class, if you go to organizations, you will find this organization listed there once I add you. So if I'm going to make a repo in this organization, it works best to go to the web and make the repo there. And I'm going to give it a name because we'll have multiple people on this. I'm going to put my initials on this to make it unique within the organization. And I'm not going to add anything else. I'm going to create that repo. And now I've got this URL here. And if I go to, I'm going to copy that. It actually gives me the code right here to add that to my repo. So I can just open a terminal. So rather than using that right now, I'm just going to open up a terminal and I'm going to add it to the repo using the repository. Okay, so what I'm going to do at this point is initialize repository. I'm not going to publish to GitHub. I'm just going to initialize the repository initially, and I'm going to call this initial commit. And if I were to publish branch here, again, it's going to my personal repo here, and I don't want to do that. So instead of using, I'm going to escape out of that. Instead of using the publish branch feature here, I'm going to go here to add remote, and then I'm going to put that URL for my remote here. I'm going to call it origin, which is kind of the default, and I'm going to publish the branch. Then I'm going to verify that it actually got to this repo. And there it is. So that now I have my project published to the repository that I want. Thank you very much.